I never imagined that anonymous notes could completely change my life. My name is Daniel, I'm 28 years old, and I work from home as a graphic designer. You know that kind of life that looks perfectly organized on the outside, but on the inside, it's just a huge void? That's exactly how I felt. My apartment was nice, my job paid well, my parents called me every Sunday, but I was alone. Profoundly alone. And the worst part was, I didn't even know if I had the courage to change it anymore. I lived in one of those vintage buildings in the heart of the city. The kind with character, solid construction, original, hardwood, and an ancient elevator that moved at glacial speed. But there was something comforting about it. Maybe it was the rhythm. Wake up, make coffee, work from home, occasionally venture out for groceries, come back, work some more, sleep, repeat. I knew my neighbors by sight. The lady on the third floor who always came down with her heavy bags at 9 in the morning. The young couple on the second floor who argued on Saturdays. The man on the fifth floor who had 3 cats. But I never talked to anyone. I just waved, smiled politely, and went on my way. And then there was him, the building's night security guard. Honestly, I hadn't even paid much attention to him in the first few weeks after I moved in. He was just another person who was part of the scenery. But you know when you start noticing someone without meaning to? As if your brain decided on its own that this person deserved your attention? He must have been around 32, 33 years old. Short hair, always well-groomed, impeccable uniform. And he had that serious yet gentle demeanor. He always opened the door for residents, helped carry heavy groceries, and was attentive to any strange noise. I saw him every night when I went down to throw out the trash, or when I arrived late from some rare engagement. I greeted him with a discreet, "Good evening." He would reply, "Good evening, resident of 402. Always like that, formal, distant, professional, and I didn't think much of it. I swear I didn't. Until that Thursday. It was a regular Thursday. I had worked all day on a boring project for an even more boring client. My head ached. I was exhausted. I just wanted to take a shower, eat some frozen food, and collapse into bed. When I got home, it was almost midnight. The 4th floor hallway was empty and silent, lit only by those yellowish lamps that made everything seem more melancholic than it really was. And that's when I saw it. A folded note, taped to my door. I stopped. I stood there for a few seconds, just staring. Because that was strange. No one had ever left anything at my door. Not even junk mail. Not even a notice from the building manager. Nothing. My first reaction was to look around the hallway, as if someone might be watching me, as if it were a prank. But there was no one. Just me and that small white paper taped to the door. I slowly peeled off the note, almost afraid it would explode in my hands. I entered the apartment, closed the door, and turned on the lights. My heart was beating faster than it should have been. It was ridiculous, I know. It was just a piece of paper. But there was something unsettling about the situation. I unfolded the note. The handwriting was careful, in cursive letters, and it read, "Daniel, I know you don't really know me, but I wish you did. Every night, when you pass by me, I think about what I'd say if I had the courage. But I don't. Not yet. So, I'm writing this. I hope you're not scared. I just wanted you to know that someone truly sees you." I read it 3 times. 4. 5. My brain froze. Who had written that? How did they know my name? And what did "someone truly sees you" mean? Was it romantic? Was it threatening? I couldn't decide. I sat on the couch, still holding the paper. My mind started doing what it always does. Analyzing, dissecting, looking for patterns. Who in the building would know my name? The building. Manager, of course. Some neighbors, maybe. But who would care enough to write a note like that? And more importantly, who would write something like this and not have the courage to say it in person? I stayed awake for hours that night. I reread the note several times. I tried to recognize the handwriting, as if that would give me a clue, but I didn't recognize anything. It was just beautiful, careful, anonymous handwriting. And you know what the worst part was? I liked it. I liked knowing that someone had noticed me, that someone had thought of me. that I wasn't as invisible as I thought I was. But I was also scared, because it was too intimate, too vulnerable, and I didn't know if I was ready to deal with it. In the following days, I started paying attention to everything, to everyone. In the elevator, I looked at people and tried to imagine if it could have been them. The lady on the 3rd floor? Unlikely. The couple on the 2nd floor? It didn't make sense. The Catman? Definitely not. And then I started thinking about the security guard. Because he knew my name, of course he did. He had access to the resident list. He saw me every night. He once said, "Good evening, resident of 402. He knew. But could it be him? I tried to dismiss the idea, because it seemed unlikely. He was so professional, so distant. He had never shown anything beyond basic politeness. No lingering glances, no different smiles, nothing. But then I started to remember. Small details. How he always opened the door for me a second before I arrived, as if he were waiting. How he sometimes quickly averted his gaze when our eyes met. How, that one time I came down carrying a heavy box, he offered help without me even asking. They were small things, insignificant. But now, with that note burning in my mind, everything seemed to take on a new meaning. Was I going crazy? Was I seeing things that weren't there? For 3 days, nothing happened. No new note, no clue. I continued my routine, but now I was hyper-aware of everything. Every time I went downstairs, my heart sped up a little. Every time I passed the security guard, I tried to read something on his face, but he remained the same. Serious, professional, distant. And then, on Sunday night, it happened again. I had gone out to buy some things at the 24-hour market. I returned around 11 at night. I took the elevator up, tired, carrying 2 heavy bags. When I reached my apartment door, there it was. Another note. My stomach churned. I let the bags drop to the floor, tore the paper from the door, and rushed inside. I closed the door behind me, leaned against it, and read, "I know you must be confused. I'm sorry about that. I don't want to scare you. I just want you to know that you're not alone. I see you every day. And you are beautiful. Not in a superficial way. You're beautiful in the way you walk slowly when you're tired. In the way you smile politely even when you're clearly exhausted. In the way you hold your coffee every morning as if it's the only thing keeping you going. I see you, Daniel. And I wish I could tell you this in person. But I'm afraid. Afraid of ruining everything. Afraid you don't feel the same way. Afraid I'm just another idiot who fell for the wrong person." I sat on the floor, right there, with my back to the door, and felt tears stream down my face. Because it was so beautiful, and so sad, and so real. Whoever had written that saw me in a way I had never been seen before. They truly saw me. Not as the designer who delivers projects on time. Not as the son who calls his parents every Sunday. Not as the polite neighbor who waves in the hallway. They saw me as Daniel. Just Daniel. Tired, lonely, trying to survive. And I wanted to know who it was. I needed to know. But I was also afraid. Because what if it was someone I didn't expect? What if it was someone who would make everything complicated? What if, upon finding out, everything fell apart? I spent the night awake again. This time, not just thinking. Planning. Because now I had a mission. I was going to find out who was leaving those notes. No matter how. No matter how long it took. On Monday morning, I made a decision. I was going to start observing. Really, observing. I was going to pay attention to every detail, to every movement, to every face. And the first place I was going to start was the lobby. Because if there was one person in that building who saw everyone come and go, who knew all the residents' schedules, who had access to everything, it was the night shift guard. That night, for the first time since I moved in, I purposely went down just to throw out the trash. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to see if he would be there. And he was. Sitting behind the front desk, fiddling with his phone. When the elevator door opened and I stepped out, he looked up. Our eyes met for a second. 2 seconds. 3. He looked away first. "Good evening, resident of 402, he said, as always. Good evening, I replied, trying to sound casual. I walked to the outdoor trash can, threw out the bag I had brought, and walked back slowly, very slowly. Because I was trying to see something. Some sign, some clue. When I passed the front desk again, he was looking at me. Not at his phone. At me. And when our eyes met again, he didn't look away immediately. He stayed there, looking at me, as if he was trying to decide something. It was only for a second. But it was enough. Because I saw something in that look. Something that wasn't just professional courtesy. Something deeper. More vulnerable. And my heart pounded. I entered the elevator without saying anything. I pressed the 4th floor button. And as the doors closed, I saw through the glass that he was still looking at me. I went up to my apartment in a daze. I went in, locked the door, and leaned against it, trying to process what had just happened. Could it be him? Could the security guard, that serious professional man I saw every night, be the person sending me those notes? And if it was, what would I do? Because now, for the first time since all this began, I didn't just have curiosity. I had hope. And also fear. A lot of fear. Because if it was him, everything would change. My routine, my sense of security, my comfortable solitude. And I didn't know if I was ready for that. But one thing was certain. I needed to find out the truth. And I was willing to do whatever it took. In the following days, I found myself doing something I never imagined. Studying the rhythms of my own building like an amateur detective. It sounds ridiculous when I say it like that, but that's exactly what it was. I watched from the window, paying attention to schedules, movements, trying to decipher a pattern that would lead me to the person behind those words. And you know what's even stranger? It wasn't just curiosity. It was something deeper. It was as if those notes had awakened a part of me that had been dormant for too long. The part that still believes in real connections, in vulnerability, in someone who truly sees you. I started noticing things. The night guard always made his rounds at the same times. 10 p.m., midnight, 2 a.m., methodical, professional. I had never paid attention to it before, but now every detail mattered. Because if someone was leaving notes in the middle of the night, they needed to know this routine. They needed to know when the hallway would be empty. I spent 3 nights awake, observing. Not obsessively, but with that silent attention of someone trying to solve a mystery that matters more than it should. And it was during this observation that I started to notice him. Gabriel. I didn't know his name yet, but I had seen him many times. Tall, broad shoulders, that calm demeanor of someone who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. He had been working in the building for a few months. Always polite. Always with a genuine smile when we crossed paths in the elevator. It wasn't that automatic courtesy smile. It was real. Warm. It's funny how you can coexist with someone in the same space and not truly see them. He had always been there, but I had never paid attention. Now, observing from my window, I noticed every detail. How he carefully checked the doors. How he stopped to adjust the hallway plant that always leaned to one side. How sometimes he would stand still for a few seconds, just looking out the hallway window, as if lost in thought. There was something about him. A familiar loneliness, as if he too was searching for something he couldn't name. But I couldn't be sure. And the last thing I wanted was to project my own needs onto someone who might just be an employee doing his job. So I kept watching, waiting for some kind of confirmation. The confirmation came on a Thursday night. I was coming home late from work, exhausted after a meeting that ran overtime. The elevator stopped on my floor, and when the doors opened, there he was. Gabriel. He was coming out of the maintenance room with a toolbox. "Good evening," he said, and that smile appeared again. Only this time I really paid attention. To his eyes, to the way the smile reached his eyes, leaving small wrinkles at the corners. It was genuine, warm, and there was something more there. A brief, almost imperceptible spark, as if he was happy to see me. "Good evening," I replied, trying to seem normal, but feeling my heart race in a completely irrational way. "Is everything okay with the apartment?" he asked, pointing to the toolbox. "I got a call about a leak on this floor, but it seems it was in 804. "Everything's fine here," I said, and then, on an impulse, I added, "You work late." He shrugged, but there was something in the gesture, an almost invisible sadness. "Night shifts. Someone has to be around, right? And I don't have much to do at home anyway." The way he said it, too casual, as if he was trying to hide the weight of those words. I knew that tone. I used the same one when someone asked me why I worked so much. "I understand," I said, and I wanted to say more. I wanted to ask something, to extend that conversation. But he was already walking away, waving in a friendly manner. Have a good night. Any problems, just call. And then he turned the corner of the hallway and disappeared. I stood there, heart still racing, trying to process that interaction. It had been brief, professional, absolutely normal, but there was something there, in the way he looked at me, in the disguised sadness in his voice when he mentioned having nothing to do at home. I went into the apartment and straight to the window. Half an hour later, during his midnight round, I saw him stop in front of my door. He looked around, as he did every night, and then took something out of his pocket, a small folded piece of paper. He placed it under the door and moved on, his footsteps echoing down the empty hallway. It was him, Gabriel. I didn't move for a few minutes. I just stood there, processing. The kind security guard who always greeted me in the elevator. The man who stopped to adjust the hallway plants. Who worked night shifts because he had nothing waiting for him at home. He was the one who was seeing me, who was writing those words, who was sharing his loneliness with mine. When I finally opened the door and picked up the note, my hands trembled slightly. Today I realized something. Loneliness isn't the absence of people around. It's the absence of someone who truly sees you. I spend the whole day surrounded by people. I greet residents, talk to colleagues, smile, and do my job. But no one really sees me. No one asks how I really am. No one notices when I pretend to be fine, but am falling apart inside. You are different. When you cross paths with me in the hallway, there's something in your gaze. As if you understand. As if you also know what it's like to wear a mask all day and only be able to take it off when you're alone. Maybe I'm projecting. Maybe you're just polite and I'm reading too much into things. But I wanted you to know, when I see you, I don't just see another resident. I see someone who seems to carry the same weight as me. Is it crazy to expect that someone we only know superficially could somehow understand us better than people we've known for years? Is it naive to believe in a true connection? One that doesn't need words, that simply exists? I wanted to tell you this, but I'm afraid of being wrong. Afraid of ruining this little fantasy I've built in my head. So I keep writing these notes that you might not even read. But at least here, in these words, I can be honest. I can take off my mask for a few minutes. I read those words 3 times. And with each reading, something inside me broke and rebuilt itself at the same time. He saw me, truly. And what he saw was exactly what I was feeling. The loneliness disguised as productivity. The social mask we wear to pretend everything is fine. The burden of being functional on the outside while crumbling on the inside. And he was afraid of being wrong. Afraid of ruining something by making it real. I knew that fear intimately. I sat on the couch, still holding the note, and let my mind wander through all possible scenarios. What would happen if I replied? What would happen if we made this real? If we stepped out of the safe realm of anonymous words into the vulnerability of a real connection? There were barriers, of course. He was a building employee. There was a work dynamic there, a hierarchy, even if informal. What if I was misinterpreting? What if there was an age difference, a difference in experience, in expectations? But then I returned to his words, to the brutal honesty of those sentences, to the way he had seen me, truly seen me, when everyone else just looked through me. When was the last time someone saw me like that? When was the last time I allowed someone to see me like that? I stayed awake all night, that note in my hand, making a decision that felt both insignificant and monumental. To reply or not to reply. To continue observing from afar or to take a step towards real vulnerability. At 5 in the morning, as the sky began to lighten, I picked up a paper and a pen. My hands trembled as I wrote. Every word was a choice. Every sentence, a bridge being built between 2 solitudes. I won't say what I wrote, not yet, but I can say it was honest. It was terrifying. It was real. I folded the paper, put it in a white envelope, and waited. At 6 in the morning, I knew Gabriel would make his last round before the end of his shift. It was always at the same time, methodical, predictable. I knew his rhythms now. I placed the envelope under the mat in front of my door, leaving a small part visible. Not too obvious, but not so hidden that he might miss it. And then I went back inside and walked to the window. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it. My hands were sweating. That feeling of being on the edge of something, of making a decision that cannot be undone. At 6:05, I saw him turn the corner of the hallway. Gabriel, in his impeccable uniform, his professional posture, his tired gait of someone at the end of a long shift. He stopped in front of my door to do his routine check. Initially, he didn't notice the envelope. He was going to move on. But then something caught his attention. That small white part sticking out from under the mat. He looked around. He bent down. He picked up the envelope. And then, for just a second, he stopped. Completely still. Just holding that white envelope in his hands. As if he knew exactly what it was. As if he was processing what it meant. He looked at my door. For a long moment, he just looked, as if he could see me through the wood. Then, he put the envelope in his shirt pocket, close to his heart, and continued his round. But I had seen. The way his hands trembled slightly as he picked up the envelope. The way he had to take a deep breath before moving on. The way he looked at my door for those eternal seconds. He felt it. Whatever was happening between us, he felt it too. As I watched him disappear down the hallway, completing his last round before leaving, a single question hung in the nascent morning air. What would happen now that we both knew we were no longer alone? I was sure he wouldn't see my reply. After all, who really pays attention to notes left in trash cans during a security round at 3 in the morning? But Gabriel wasn't who. He was different from anyone I had ever known. The next night, I woke up at 2:47 a.m. My body had already adapted to his schedule, and went straight to the window. It was raining, that fine São Paulo rain that makes everything glow cinematically under the streetlights. Gabriel was doing his round, but there was something different about the way he walked. He seemed to be looking for something. When he got near the trash can where I had left my reply, he stopped. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. He looked around, a quick, almost furtive movement, and then he bent down. When he stood up, he was holding the piece of paper I had carefully folded. What happened next completely destroyed me. He smiled. It wasn't a big or dramatic smile. It was small, almost imperceptible if you weren't paying attention. But I was. I had been paying attention to every detail of him for weeks, and that smile, that small moment of genuine happiness, meant everything. Gabriel carefully folded my note, as if it were something precious, and tucked it into his shirt pocket, not in his pants pocket, where he kept his keys and walkie-talkie. In his shirt pocket, close to his heart. He knows it was me who answered, I thought, feeling a mix of panic and euphoria. The game has changed, and it truly had, because 3 nights later, when I woke up and looked out the window, Gabriel was doing his rounds. But this time, there was something different in the trash can. A piece of white paper gleamed under the yellow street lamp light. I waited for him to move away, though each second of waiting felt like an eternity. And then I ran down the stairs like a lovesick teenager rushing to a first date. My bare feet barely touched the steps. When I reached the ground floor, I checked that no one was in the lobby and slipped out the back door. The note was held down by a small stone he had placed there so the wind wouldn't carry it away. I picked up the paper with trembling hands and rushed back to the apartment. I only managed to breathe when I locked the door behind me. I sat on the living room floor, leaning against the door, and opened the note. The handwriting was slanted, a bit hurried, but legible. Thanks for answering. I thought you'd ignore it. Everyone ignores. I see you too. Sometimes I look up and wonder which window you're in. If you feel as lonely as I do down here, this job, it's like existing in a parallel reality. Everyone's asleep and I'm patrolling hallways, protecting people I'll never truly know. But now I know you, sort of, in a strange way. It makes me feel less invisible. G. I read the note 4 times in a row, memorizing every word, every comma. Everyone ignores. That broke my heart, because I understood perfectly. I too had spent most of my life being ignored, by my parents when I came out to them, by coworkers who never invited me to drinks after work, by a world that seemed designed for straight couples and their perfect families. Gabriel felt the same way, and suddenly, the night shift guard I admired from afar became someone real. Someone with pain. Someone who was also looking for connection in this immense, indifferent city. I wrote my reply right there, on the living room floor, at 4 in the morning, with tears in my eyes. You were never invisible to me. From the first night I saw you, you were the most real thing in this building. I feel lonely too, most of the time. It's funny how you can be surrounded by people and still feel completely isolated. But when I look out the window and see you down there, doing your rounds, taking care of all of us, I feel less lost. You make me feel that maybe, just maybe, there are other people who understand how hard it is to simply exist sometimes. Thank you for seeing me. Windows 7B. I left the note in the same trash can that dawn, and so our ritual began. Every night, Gabriel left a note. Every night, I replied. We talked about everything. Our complicated families, our secret fears, our abandoned dreams. He told me about his father who never accepted that he didn't want to be a police officer like all the men in his family. I told him about my mother who stopped talking to me when I met my first boyfriend. Through those crumpled pieces of paper, we built an intimacy I had never experienced with anyone. Not even with people I had dated for months. But life, of course, doesn't only exist at 3 in the morning. It was on a Tuesday afternoon that it happened. I was coming back from the market, carrying bags too heavy for one person, when I entered the building lobby and saw him. Gabriel. In daylight. Wearing the same uniform, but looking completely different under the natural light. Younger. More vulnerable. He was talking to the superintendent about something related to the security cameras that had stopped working in the basement. Our eyes met. It was like being punched in the stomach. All the air left my lungs at once, because there he was. The man who knew my deepest secrets. The man whose words I had memorized. the man I was, undeniably falling in love with. And I couldn't say anything. "Good afternoon," he said, in a professional voice that didn't match the intimate tone of the notes at all. "Good afternoon," I replied, my voice coming out higher than normal. The superintendent continued talking about the cameras, completely oblivious to the electric tension that filled the space between Gabriel and me. But we felt it. It was impossible not to feel it. He looked at me as if he was trying to memorize my face. I looked at him doing exactly the same thing. Neither of us mentioned the notes. It was an unspoken agreement. The daytime world and the nighttime world were separate realities, but the chemistry was undeniable. Even the superintendent eventually noticed the strange silence and looked from me to Gabriel with a confused expression. "Everything all right, folks?" he asked. "Yes," Gabriel quickly replied, looking away. "Just thinking about the cameras." I went up to my apartment with trembling legs. I left the grocery bags on the kitchen floor and went straight to the window, needing to process what had just happened. I had seen Gabriel, up close. His eyes were even more intense than I imagined. Dark brown with small golden flecks that gleamed under the light. He had a small scar above his left eyebrow. His hands were large and seemed strong, but he moved them with a delicate touch when he gestured. And he had seen me too, not as a silhouette in the window, but as a real person. A man of flesh and blood who probably looked as nervous and vulnerable as he felt. That night, Gabriel left a longer note than the others. "It was strange seeing you today. Strange good. You're exactly as I imagined, only better. Your eyes, I didn't expect your eyes to be so expressive. I could see everything you were feeling, and I wanted to say so many things, but I couldn't. Not there. Not in front of the superintendent. This is getting harder, pretending we don't know each other during the day. Pretending you're just another resident, and I'm just another security guard. But maybe it's better this way. Maybe it's safer. Homtao. Safer." That word stayed with me for days, because Gabriel was right. What we were doing, whatever it was risky. He was the building's security guard. I was a resident. He was 20 years younger than me. We were two gay men in a country where it was still dangerous to show affection in public. There were so many reasons to stop. So many reasons to let it die a natural death before it became something bigger. But I couldn't stop. I started avoiding him during the day. When I needed to leave the building, I waited until I was sure he wasn't in the lobby. I checked through the window before going down. I took the stairs instead of the elevator to avoid the risk of running into him. It was ridiculous. I was a 42-year-old man acting like a teenager avoiding their crush at school. But the truth was, I was scared. Scared of what those daytime encounters did to me. Scared of how my heart raced just from seeing him. Scared that if we spent too much time together in reality, not just through notes, I would have to admit what it truly was. And then came the night that changed everything. It was 2 a.m. when I heard screams in the hallway. I opened the door and saw the lady from 7C, Donna Helena, a widow who lived alone with 3 cats, in total panic. "It's flooding!" "My apartment is flooding." Other residents started coming out to see what was happening. Water was seeping from under her apartment door, forming a puddle in the hallway. Someone shouted, "Call the superintendent!" "He's not answering," another resident replied. And then, as if summoned, Gabriel appeared in the hallway. He must have been doing his rounds on the floor above and heard the commotion. "Everyone calm down," he said, with that natural commanding voice I had noticed in the lobby. "Donna Helena, are you all right?" While the other residents panicked, Gabriel took control of the situation with impressive efficiency. He went to the basement and shut off the water main for the entire building. He returned with tools and towels. He helped Donna Helena move valuables out of her apartment. He called the emergency plumber. He calmed everyone down. I watched everything from a distance, leaning against the hallway wall, completely fascinated. It wasn't just his competence, although that was extremely attractive. It was the way he treated people, with genuine respect. With patience, he stayed with Donna Helena until 5 a.m, waiting for the plumber to arrive, even though his shift ended at 6. When everything was finally resolved and the residents returned to their apartments, Gabriel and I were left alone in the hallway. Water still covered the floor, reflecting the fluorescent lights from the ceiling. "You were amazing," I said before I could stop myself. He smiled, that small, devastating smile. "Just doing my job." No, it was more than that. We stared at each other for a long moment. So close I could see the tiny drops of sweat on his forehead. So close it would be easy, so dangerously easy to close the distance between us. But I didn't, and neither did he. "Good night," Gabriel said softly, and then turned and walked away. I returned to my apartment feeling as if my chest would explode. I sat at my desk and picked up a pen and paper. My hand trembled so much I could barely write, but I had to. I needed to tell the truth before my courage abandoned me. I wrote, "I don't want to do this through notes anymore. I want to get to know you for real, not as a shadow in the window or words on paper. I want to hear your voice when you talk about the things that make you happy. I want to see your face when you laugh. I know it's risky. I know there are 1,000 reasons not to do this. But for the first time in years, I feel like it might be worth the risk. If you feel the same, meet me. Not here, not in the building. Somewhere we can just be two people. No uniform, no apartment, no rules. Let me take you for coffee. Or a beer. Or just wander aimlessly through the city. Let me get to know you, Gabriel. 7B, Marcos. My name is Marcos. I reread the note 10 times. Each time I read it, my stomach tightened more. It was too vulnerable, too exposed, too risky. But I left it anyway. I went down to the ground floor at 3 in the morning and placed the note in the trash can. My hand hesitated before letting go. A part of me wanted to take it back, tear it up, pretend I had never written it. But I didn't. I left the note there and went back to the apartment. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. I stayed at the window, waiting for Gabriel to appear for his rounds. When he finally showed up at 3:15 a.m., my heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I watched as he approached the dumpster. I watched as he picked up the note. I watched as he read it. And then I watched as he stopped completely, holding the paper with both hands, his head bowed as if in prayer. He stayed like that for so long that I started to panic. Maybe I had gone too far. Maybe he would be angry. Maybe he would leave and never leave another note. But then Gabriel lifted his head and looked directly at my window. Even from afar, even in the dark, I felt the weight of that gaze. It was as if he could see me, truly see me, for the first time. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He made no dramatic gesture. He just held the note against his chest, right where his heart beat. And then he continued his rounds, disappearing into the darkness of the night. I was trembling. Trembling with fear, with hope, with anticipation. Because now there was no turning back. I had put my heart into words and left it in his hands. I had offered the most vulnerable thing anyone can offer another, the possibility of rejection. All that remained was to wait. Wait to see if Gabriel was brave enough to take the next step. Or if what we had built through notes and silent dawns would die before it had a chance to become real. The minutes that followed were the longest of my life. Every second seemed to drag on like an eternity as I stared at that dark wooden door, waiting for any sign of movement, any sound that would indicate Gabriel had read my letter. I had already imagined every possible scenario. Maybe he would simply ignore the note. Maybe he would find it inappropriate, or worse, embarrassing. Maybe we would never want to look each other in the eye again, condemned to coexist in this building in uncomfortable silence for the rest of our lives. But then, as the clock neared, midnight and I was beginning to accept silence as an answer, I heard the unmistakable sound of paper sliding under the door. My heart exploded in my chest. For a moment, I was paralyzed, just staring at that piece of white paper contrasting with the dark hallway floor. It was real. Gabriel had responded. With visibly trembling hands, I picked up the note and ran back to my apartment, closing the door behind me as if protecting a precious treasure. I sat on the sofa, took 3 deep breaths to calm my racing heart, and carefully unfolded the sheet. Gabriel's handwriting was elegant, but there was a slight irregularity in the letters that suggested nervousness. He was scared too. "Thank you for your courage," the note began. "You can't imagine the relief I felt reading your words. I was also terrified of being alone in this feeling." My eyes quickly scanned the following lines, eager for every word, every revelation. "I need to be honest with you," Gabriel continued. "This isn't the first time I felt something like this, but it's the first time I've had the courage not to run away." And then, in the next few lines, Gabriel shared something that completely transformed my understanding of him and of us. He wrote about his journey of self-discovery, about how he spent years trying to fit into expectations that weren't his own. He told about the day he finally came out to himself, at 24, on a rainy night when he realized that living a lie was more painful than facing the truth. He described his family's reaction when he decided to be honest with them. His mother cried for 3 days straight, not out of rejection, but out of fear of what the world might do to her son. His father remained silent for weeks, processing, until he finally hugged him and just said, "You're still my son." Gabriel wrote about the glances at work, the conversations that abruptly stopped when he entered the room, the constant feeling of being judged, measured, reduced to a single aspect of who he was. "That's why I moved to this building," he explained. "I wanted a fresh start, a place where I could just be me, with no prior history, no explanations needed." But then you appeared in that hallway, and for the first time in years, I felt that maybe I didn't have to be alone on this journey. Tears streamed down my face as I read. They weren't tears of sadness, but of profound recognition. Every word of Gabriel's echoed my own experiences, my own fears, my own hopes. I wasn't alone in my fear. And more importantly, Gabriel wasn't alone in his either. I realized at that moment that what I felt for him went far beyond physical attraction or the excitement of a forbidden romance. It was something deeper, more fundamental. It was the connection between two people who understood the courage it takes to simply exist authentically in a world that constantly questions their validity. Gabriel wasn't just the handsome neighbor who made my heart race. He was someone who had fought battles similar to mine, who carried similar scars, who understood the weight of living in a society that had not yet learned to fully accept love in all its forms. And then, in the last part of the note, came the invitation that would change everything. "Your notes are precious to me," Gabriel wrote. "But written words, however honest, have their limitations. I'd like to invite you to meet in person, not by chance in a hallway, but intentionally. On the building's terrace, where there's a view of the city that always brings me peace. Tomorrow night during my break at 10 o'clock. If you want to, of course. No pressure, no expectations. Just two neighbors having an honest conversation under the stars." It ended with a simple line that completely disarmed me. "Whatever your answer, thank you for making me feel less alone." I held the note against my chest, feeling waves of emotion I couldn't name. Terror and exhilaration mixed in equal measure. The terrace. A private, symbolic place where we could finally have a real conversation, with no doors between us. But the terror was real. What if reality didn't match the magic of our notes? What if the connection that seemed so strong on paper dissolved when we were face to face? What if I said something wrong, or worse, didn't know what to say? I needed to talk to someone. I needed an outside perspective before my anxious mind created 1,000 catastrophic scenarios. I grabbed my phone and called Marina, my closest friend since college. She answered on the third ring, with that sleepy but immediately alert voice that only true friends can have when you need them. "Is this an emergency, or just late-night anxiety?" she asked, but her tone was affectionate. "A little of both," I admitted, and then told her everything. The notes, Gabriel, the invitation to the terrace, my fears. Marina listened in silence, until the end, and then said something I desperately needed to hear. "Honey, you've spent so much time afraid of being vulnerable that you forgot vulnerability is exactly what creates real connections. This man just shared his most intimate story with you. He's scared too, but he had enough courage to invite you. Now it's your turn to have enough courage to accept." "What if it goes wrong?" I asked, my voice small. "What if it goes right?" she replied immediately. "You'll spend the rest of your life wondering what could have happened on that terrace, or you'll have the courage to find out." After I hung up, I sat at my desk with a blank piece of paper in front of me. It was time to write my answer. My hand hesitated for a moment over the paper, and then I began to write. "Gabriel, I accept your invitation, not because I'm not afraid, I'm very afraid, but because you taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing something important despite it. I'll be on the terrace tomorrow at 10. And thank you for trusting me with your story. It made me understand that real connections are built not in perfect moments, but in honest moments." I reread the words 3 times, making sure they captured exactly what I wanted to say. Then, before I could regret it, I folded the paper, went out into the hallway, and slid it under Gabriel's door. I didn't wait for a response. I went back to my apartment, knowing that the next communication between us would be personal, real, without physical barriers. I spent the next day in a state of anticipation that oscillated between pure excitement and absolute panic. I tried to distract myself with work, with cleaning, with anything that would keep my mind busy, but my thoughts always returned to those 10 o'clock that were inexorably approaching. It wasn't physical preparation I needed. I had already taken 3 nervous showers and changed clothes 5 times. It was emotional preparation. It was reminding myself that no matter what happened on that terrace, I had already done something courageous. I had already chosen authenticity over fear, and Gabriel had too. That, in itself, already meant something important. But as the clock struck 9:50, a last thought assailed me, more insistent than all the others. What if reality didn't match? The magic of the notes? What if when we were face to face, the connection that seemed so strong on paper simply evaporated? What if I discovered that I had built a castle of expectations on a foundation of imagination? At 9:55, I grabbed my jacket, not because it was cold, but because I needed something to do with my trembling hands. At 9:58, I opened my apartment door and walked towards the stairs that led to the terrace. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it echoing in the silence of the sleeping building. I climbed the steps slowly, each step an affirmation of courage, each breath a choice to move forward despite the fear. When I reached the terrace door, I paused for a moment, my hand on the doorknob. On the other side of this door was Gabriel, not a fantasy, not an idealization written in notes, but a real person, with all the complexities, imperfections, and possibilities that implied. It was terrifying. It was exciting. It was the most important moment of my life. I took a deep breath, turned the doorknob, and opened the door. And there he was. Gabriel was standing near the edge of the terrace, looking at the illuminated city, but turned when he heard the door open. Our eyes met, and for the first time there was no door between us. The air on the terrace was heavy, not with rain, not with wind, but with something heavier, more palpable, as if the universe itself was holding its breath with me. Gabriel was there, standing, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city lights. And I was frozen in the doorway, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. For a moment, which felt like an eternity, neither of us moved. He looking forward, I looking at him. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, intense, as if every wordless second said more than any conversation ever had. Then he turned, slowly, and our eyes met. It wasn't like before. Not like the quick glances in the office hallway. Not like that time in the elevator where I had to pretend to be checking my phone. This was different. This was conscious, intentional. He knew that I knew. I knew that he knew. And now we were here, on his terrace, with no notes to hide behind. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said, and his voice was different. Lower. A little shaky, perhaps. Or maybe it was just my imagination looking for signs that he was as nervous as I was. I laughed. That nervous laugh that escapes when you don't know what else to do. "I wasn't sure either," I admitted, and took a step forward. Then another, until I was beside him, looking at the same city he was looking at. "But here I am." "Here, you are," he repeated, and there was something in the way he said it, as if he couldn't believe it. As if he was afraid that if he blinked, I would disappear. We stood there, side by side, in silence again. But now it was different. Now we were sharing the silence, instead of being alone in it. "This is strange, isn't it?" I said finally, and he turned his head to look at me. "What?" "This. Us. Talking." I gestured vaguely between us. "I spent weeks reading your words, memorizing every sentence. And now you're here, actually speaking, and it's completely different." Gabriel gave a small smile, almost shy. "Worse?" "No," I replied immediately. "Just different. Your voice is deeper than I imagined." "I imagined yours too," he admitted. "And you're right, it's strange. Good, but strange." Another silence. But this time, I broke it with a laugh. A real laugh, not the nervous one from before. "What was that?" he asked, but he was smiling too. "It's just..." I shook my head. We wrote so many words to each other, entire conversations on paper, and now that we're face to face, we don't know what to say. Gabriel laughed too, and the sound was like music. "It's ridiculous. Completely ridiculous." And just like that, out of nowhere, the tension began to dissolve. Not completely. There was still that energy between us, that unspoken weight. But now there was something lighter too. Something human. "Can I confess something?" he asked after a moment. My heart skipped a beat. "Of course. I recognized your handwriting long before you recognized mine." I looked at him, surprised. "Really?" He nodded. "That report you left on my desk 3 months ago, with the handwritten notes in the margins. I saw it and I don't know. I committed it to memory. And when you left the first note, I knew immediately it was you." "Then why didn't you say anything?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Fear," he replied simply. "Fear that if I made it real, everything would fall apart. The notes were safe. I could say things on paper that I'd never have the courage to say in person. I could be honest without risking everything." His words resonated with me because they were exactly how I felt. "I understand," I said softly. "It's easier to write than to speak." "Much easier," he agreed. Then after a pause, "But it's also more cowardly." I turned to face him now. "I don't think it was cowardly." "No?" "No. I think it was prudent. Smart even. We work together. You're in a position of authority. And besides all that..." I took a deep breath. "Besides all that, feelings are scary. Especially when you're not sure if they're reciprocated." Gabriel stared at me, really stared at me. And the intensity of his gaze made my stomach flip. "And now?" he asked. "Are you sure now?" It was the question that would change everything. The question that, once answered, had no turning back. "I spent weeks," I began, choosing my words carefully, "reading your notes, waiting for them, looking for them. Every time I found a new one, my whole day changed. It got better, lighter, as if suddenly the world made sense." I paused, gathering courage. "And when I realized it was you who was writing, My voice faltered a little. I was terrified, because it meant this was real, that I wasn't imagining a connection with an anonymous stranger. I was feeling something for you, for Gabriel, my colleague, I hesitated. "My friend." "And that scared you," he said. It wasn't a question. "It terrified me," I admitted. "It still terrifies me, to be honest." "Why?" "Because what if it goes wrong?" The words tumbled out. "What if we try and it doesn't work? What if it ends badly and it's awkward at work? What if I mess everything up? And what if it goes right?" His voice cut through my anxiety spiral like a hot knife through butter. I blinked. "What?" "What if it goes right?" he repeated, taking a step closer. "You're listing all the ways this could go wrong. But what if it goes right? What if it's exactly what we both need?" I had no answer for that, because honestly, I had spent so much time fearing failure that I hadn't even considered success. "I'm scared too," Gabriel continued, and now he was close enough that I could see the tiny flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Terrified, actually, because I started writing those notes weeks before you replied." "Weeks?" he nodded. "Weeks. I'd leave one, then wait. Nothing. I'd leave another. Wait again. Nothing. And I started to think I was being ridiculous. Pathetic, even. Leaving anonymous notes like a teenager with a crush. "Why did you keep going then?" "Because I couldn't stop," he said simply. "Because every time I saw you, I wanted you to know. I wanted you to understand what I was feeling. But I couldn't just say it. So I wrote, and wrote, and wrote, hoping that one day you would reply." My heart was racing now. "And I did, and you did," he echoed, and the small smile that curved his lips was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. And suddenly, it wasn't one-sided anymore. Suddenly, I had hope. "Hope for what?" "This," he said, gesturing between us. "For you to be here. For you to have come. For maybe, just maybe, you to feel the same way I do." The vulnerability in his voice was palpable. raw. And it was exactly what I needed to hear. "I do," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "I feel the same. I don't know if this is sensible. I don't know if we'll be able to navigate all the complications. I don't know how we're going to make this work. But I know that what I feel for you is real. And I know I don't want to pretend it's not." For a moment, Gabriel just looked at me. And then, so softly, I almost didn't hear it, he whispered, "Thank God." And he laughed. And I laughed. And suddenly we were both laughing, there on the terrace, under the stars and the city lights, because it was absurd. The whole situation was absurd. Two grown men communicating through secret notes, as if we were in a teenage romance. But it was our absurdity, and it was perfect. "So," I said when our laughter subsided, "what do we do now?" Gabriel became serious again, but not in a heavy way, in a determined way. "Honestly, I don't know. There's the work issue. There are company policies. There's the whole authority dynamic that probably should concern us." "It should," I agreed. "But it doesn't concern me as much as it should," he admitted. "It doesn't?" "No, because this..." He gestured between us again. "This matters more. You matter more." The words hit me like a punch to the chest, in a good way, the kind that takes your breath away. "We can be careful," I suggested. "Professional at work, and something else outside of it." "Something else," he repeated, and there was an amused tone in his voice. "What something else exactly?" I felt my face flush. I don't know. What do you want it to be?" Gabriel took a step closer. Now he was close enough that I could feel his warmth, see every detail of his face illuminated by the city lights. "I want it to be real," he said softly. "I want to stop hiding. I want to be able to talk to you without fear. I want..." He hesitated, and for the first time, I saw real uncertainty in his gaze. "I want to be allowed to want this." "Allowed by whom?" "You." The word hung between us. Permission, consent, choice. I slowly raised my hand, so slowly that he had all the time in the world to pull away if he wanted to, and touched his arm. Just a light touch, my fingers against the fabric of his shirt. He didn't pull away. "You are," I said. "You are allowed to want this, to want me." And it was as if something shifted in the air between us, as if an invisible barrier that had been there all along suddenly disappeared. Gabriel raised his own hand slowly, giving me the same chance to back away that I had given him, and touched my arm. His fingers were warm through the sleeve of my shirt. "I do," he said, and there was a certainty in his voice now that wasn't there before. "I want you. I want this. Even with all the complications, even with all the fear, I want to try." "Me too," I replied, and it was the purest truth I had ever spoken. We stood like that for a moment, just lightly touching, just existing in the same space, and it was intimate in a way no note ever could be. Then Gabriel took another step. Now we were so close I could count his eyelashes, see the way his breathing was a little quick, realize that he was just as nervous as I was. "Can I..." he began, and left the question unfinished, but I knew what he was asking, and I knew my answer. "Yes," I whispered. He leaned in, slowly, giving me 1,000 opportunities to change my mind, but I didn't change it. I didn't want to change it, and when his lips touched mine, it was as if the whole world stopped. It wasn't dramatic like in the movies. There were no fireworks or violins. It was soft, hesitant, almost shy. Just a light touch of lips against lips, experimenting, questioning, waiting. And then I leaned in too, and the kiss deepened. Still gentle, but more certain now. More intentional. My hand found its way to the back of his neck, fingers intertwining in his hair. His hand went to my waist, pulling me closer, and we just kissed. It was perfect and imperfect at the same time. A little awkward because we were nervous, but also right in a way that nothing had ever been right before. When we broke apart, eventually, reluctantly, we rested our foreheads together, both breathing a little faster than normal. "Wow," I said, because I couldn't think of anything else. Gabriel let out a low chuckle. "Yeah, wow." We stayed like that for another moment, just breathing the same air, processing what had just happened. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" I said eventually. "It does," he agreed, "but maybe change is good. Now what?" I asked the same question as before, but this time it carried a different weight, because now there was a real now. Now there was an us. Gabriel pulled back just enough to look me in the eyes. "Now we find out. One day at a time. We see how to navigate work, how to keep this between us until we know what it is. How to," he smiled, "how to make this work. No more notes?" "Well," he said, still smiling, "maybe a few notes, but also real conversations, and real dates, and..." He hesitated, blushing slightly, "and maybe more kisses." I laughed. "I think I can agree to that." "You think so?" I'm sure, I corrected. Gabriel pulled me back close, and I went willingly. We embraced there on the terrace, under the stars. And for the first time in weeks, months, maybe, I felt complete. Are you scared? He asked against my hair. Terrified, I admitted. Me too. He tightened his embrace. But I'm also hopeful. Is that weird? No, I said. It's perfect. And it was true, because yes, there was fear. There was uncertainty. There were 1,000 things that could go wrong. But there was also hope. There was possibility. There was a chance that maybe, just maybe, we had found something special. Stay a little longer? Gabriel asked when we eventually pulled apart again. I checked my phone, more out of reflex than anything else. It was late. I had work tomorrow. We both did. But when I looked back at him, at the way he was looking at me with those brown eyes full of hope and vulnerability and something that could be the beginning of love, I knew there was no other answer. Yes, I said. I'll stay. And his smile, God, that smile, was worth more than 1,000 notes. We went back inside from the terrace, and for the first time it wasn't strange. It wasn't scary. It was just right. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, about how he had noticed me months before I had noticed him, about how I had kept every note in a special box on my desk, about our fears, our hopes, our dreams, and at some point, with my head resting on his shoulder on the couch, his arm around me, I realized something. This was the beginning, not the end of the story. The beginning, there would be challenges. Definitely. We'd have to figure out how to navigate work, how to stay professional, how to handle the fact that he worked in building security, and I was a resident, a position that required careful navigation and 1,000 other complicated things. But in that moment, none of those things mattered. Because in that moment, I was in the arms of someone who had spent weeks writing his feelings in secret notes. Someone who had had the courage to invite me here. Someone who had kissed me with a tenderness that made me want to cry. And that feeling of security, of belonging, of being seen and chosen, was worth any challenge that lay ahead. Hey, Gabriel said softly, pulling me from my thoughts. Are you okay? You went quiet. I smiled against his shoulder. I'm more than okay. I'm happy. He kissed the top of my head. Me too. And we stayed like that, just existing together, savoring the simplicity and complexity of the moment. Because tomorrow would come, with all its complications and uncertainties. But today we had this. And for now, that was more than enough. That was everything. The following weeks were a delicate dance between two worlds. During the day, Gabriel was the night shift guard who crossed paths with me in the hallways with a professional nod. At night, he was the man who knew the sound of my breathing when I slept, who knew exactly how much cream I took in my coffee, who made me laugh with terrible imitations of the building's most eccentric residents. The notes continued, but now they were different. They were no longer anonymous confessions laden with fear and repressed desire. They were sweet reminders, inside jokes, little I love yous left on the fridge or hidden in my coat. I bought that bread you like. It's in the oven. Gee, your mother called. Said she's coming next week. We should talk about this. Gee, you snored all night. It was adorable. Gee, we were building something real. Something that went beyond the initial attraction. Beyond the excitement of secret encounters. We were building a life. But even as my apartment transformed into a shared space, his toothbrush next to mine, his clothes mixed with mine in the wardrobe, his scent ingrained in the sheets, there was always that invisible line we didn't cross. In the building, we were careful. A nod, a polite smile, nothing to draw attention. I knew Gabriel hated it. I could tell by the tension in his shoulders when we crossed paths in the elevator with other residents. By the way his eyes avoided mine when Mrs. Cecilia from 402 stopped to chat with me about the latest building association meeting. Doesn't it bother you? He asked one night as we prepared dinner together. His voice was calm, but I recognized that tone. It was the same one he used when he had been holding on to something important for too long. What? I pretended not to understand, but my stomach was already tightening. Having to pretend we're strangers, that you don't know the taste of my mouth, that I don't know how you moan my name when… Gabriel. I cut him off, but not in anger, in fear. He set the knife down carefully on the cutting board and turned to me. I'm tired of hiding who I am. His words were simple, but they carried a weight that made me stop breathing for a second. I'm tired of pretending that the most important person in my life is just another resident. I know. I sighed, leaning against the counter. Me too, but it's complicated. Why? Gabriel took a step towards me. Because Mrs. Cecilia might be scandalized? Because the building management might judge us? Because people will talk? Because I'm scared. The confession slipped out before I could filter it. I'm scared of how people will look at me, at us. I'm scared of losing the peace I've always had here. Gabriel watched me in silence for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. It wasn't a bitter or sarcastic smile. It was genuine, almost tender. "You know what I realized?" he said, taking my hand. "When we hide who we love, we end up hiding who we are. And I don't want you to have to hide anything, especially not from yourself." His words resonated in me like a bell. How many times throughout my life had I adjusted my behavior, measured my words, controlled my gestures so as not to raise suspicion? How many times had I failed to mention someone I was getting to know, invented excuses for not having a girlfriend, dodged questions about my personal life? I had spent so much time hiding that I didn't even realize how heavy it had become. I'm not asking us to be public displays of affection throughout the building or make a scene in the elevator, Gabriel continued, his thumb caressing my fingers. I'm just saying that. If someone asks, if the subject comes up, I don't want to have to hide who we are. And I don't think you should have to either. He was right. Of course he was. But knowing that and acting accordingly were two completely different things. What if... I started, but my voice failed. What if what? Gabriel pulled me closer, his hands framing my face. What if some people are jerks? They probably will be. What if some neighbors get uncomfortable? They certainly will. But you know what else will happen? I shook my head. We'll still be us. We'll still have dinner together, laugh together, build this together. The only difference is we'll do it without having to look over our shoulder all the time. He kissed me then, slow and deep, and I felt something inside me begin to give way. It wasn't just desire or affection. It was a door opening, a door I had kept locked for so long that I had almost forgotten it existed. When we broke apart, I rested my forehead on his. "I'm scared," I admitted again, but this time it sounded different, not like an excuse, like a fact I was willing to face. "I know," Gabriel murmured. "Me too. But I'd rather be afraid and honest than safe and invisible." In the following days, that conversation echoed in my head. I watched Gabriel interact with the residents during his shift. Always polite, always professional, but never pretending to be someone he wasn't. He didn't hide, but he didn't advertise either. He simply lived without apologizing for who he was. I wanted that too. That ease, that freedom. The moment arrived in the most ordinary way. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was returning from the grocery store with several bags when I ran into Mrs. Cecilia and her friend, Mrs. Maria from 305, in the building lobby. "Need a hand with those, dear?" Mrs. Cecilia offered, eyeing the bags. "I'm good, thanks." I smiled, shifting the weight in my arms. "Shopping like you're feeding an army," Mrs. Maria laughed. "Or is someone special coming over for dinner?" It was an innocent question. One of those questions neighbors ask without much thought. Normally, I would deflect. I would make a vague joke. I would change the subject, but Gabriel's words came back to me. "When we hide who we love, we end up hiding who we are. Actually, my boyfriend is at my place." The words came out more naturally than I expected. "We're making a special dinner tonight." There was a moment of silence, brief but noticeable. I saw surprise cross Mrs. Cecilia's face, followed by something that could be discomfort or just processing unexpected information. Then she smiled. It wasn't the same wide smile as before, but it was genuine. "How lovely, dear. I hope you enjoy it," she said, and there was sincerity in her voice. Mrs. Maria just nodded, visibly less comfortable, but polite. I got into the elevator with my heart pounding. Not from fear, but from something it took me a moment to identify. Relief. A deep, liberating relief. When I arrived at the apartment, Gabriel was in the living room, reading. He looked up when I entered and must have seen something on my face because he immediately stood up. "What happened?" "I just told Mrs. Cecilia I have a boyfriend," I said, still processing. Gabriel stood still. And I put the bags on the floor. "And she said she hopes we enjoy dinner." A slow, radiant smile lit up his face. "How are you feeling?" I thought for a moment. Scared, I admitted. But also, light. Like I'd dropped a weight I'd been carrying for so long I didn't even remember it was there anymore. Gabriel crossed the room and enveloped me in a tight hug. We stayed like that for a long moment, just breathing together. "I'm proud of you," he murmured in my ear. And those words, coming from him, meant more than I could ever express. In the following weeks, there was no major scandal, no dramatic reaction. Some neighbors were clearly uncomfortable. Shorter greetings, averted gazes. Others didn't seem to care. And some, surprisingly, were actively kind. Mr. Austin from 501, who had always been cordial but distant, stopped Gabriel one day to say he was happy for him. The young family from 203 invited us to a rooftop gathering. The building manager casually mentioned that the building had a non-discrimination policy and that if anyone bothered us, we should let her know. It wasn't perfect. There were whispered comments I pretended not to hear. There was that resident on the 6th floor who always switched elevators when he saw us. There was the anonymous, cowardly note left on my door saying I should have more decency. Gabriel wanted to find out who it was. I threw the note in the trash. You know what's funny? I commented that night as we sat on the couch. I spent so much time afraid of what people would think, what they would say. And now that I'm living exactly the situation I feared, it's not as terrible as I imagined. Because you're not alone in it anymore, Gabriel pointed out, intertwining our fingers. It's easier to face the world when you have someone by your side. He was right, but it wasn't just that. There was something deeper. A sense of integrity that came from not constantly being divided between who I was and who I pretended to be. A few days later, I found one last note from him. It wasn't on the door. It was on the bathroom mirror, written in lipstick, probably mine, which made me laugh. I don't need secret notes anymore. I can simply tell you, I love you. Gee, I took a picture before cleaning it off. I wanted to remember that marker of before and after. Looking back now, I realize how it all started so unexpectedly. An anonymous note left on a door. A handwritten confession from someone too afraid to say it out loud. I used to believe that love meant safety. It meant hiding the parts of me that might scare people away, that might make me vulnerable. It meant acceptance through invisibility. But Gabriel taught me something entirely different. He taught me that real love doesn't require hiding. It demands courage. The courage to be completely seen. With all the flaws, all the fears, all the raw truth of who you are. Our story began with secrets, with hidden notes and stolen glances and secret meetings. But it came alive in honesty, in the daily choice to be real, even when it terrified me. Especially when it terrified me. These days, when I come home from work, I don't search for notes on my door anymore. I don't need to, because Gabriel is there, in the kitchen or on the couch, or sometimes still asleep after his night shift. He's there, visible and real and mine, and when we see each other in the building lobby, he smiles at me. A genuine smile, nothing hidden, and I smile back. Because I learned that the most powerful version of love isn't the one you keep secret from the world. It's the one you have the strength to live openly, in spite of the world. Some love stories start with a simple note left on a door, but they become truly extraordinary when you find the courage to step out of hiding and allow yourself to be fully seen. Our door doesn't have anonymous notes anymore, but it has something far better. It has both our names on the buzzer. And that, I realize, is infinitely more powerful than any secret confession ever could be. Because we're no longer hidden. We're just us. And that is more than enough. It is everything.